I'm Hawa. I'm a freshman at Middlebury College.
I'm Balkisa, a freshman at University of Vermont.
Kiran, a freshman at American University.
I'm Lena. I'm also a freshman at University of Vermont.
And the four of us make up Muslim Girls Making Change. So Muslim Girls Making Change is a Vermont-based slam poetry group started in 2016. As a group, we performed around the state, nationwide, as well as competed internationally, have been recognized by numerous organizations from the National Education Association to the Huffington Post. But before Muslim Girls Making Change became a slam poetry group, we started off as really good friends, or sort of.
So Balkisa and I are actually close family friends, but we're not like friends. Well, we weren't. So we met like earlier on. We were like 7 or something, but we didn't really like get along, and I didn't really like her.
She was clearly missing out.
I don't know about
debatable
that. But then I moved my sophomore year to the same high school as her, so we got close over poetry, drug alcohol prevention work, and a lot of just different like activism that we got involved with.
And believe it or not, Kiran and I were in the same situation as well. We're family friends, and before like we hated each other.
We avoided eye contact, did not want to see you.
Want to talk to her. And then there was like this one time where her mom made her come over to my house, and we just like didn't talk. We just sat there like.
But now we're here.
Yeah, and I think what brought us together is the fact that we were able to reveal ourselves to each other. That's something that really strengthened our group as well, and what made our poems really, really raw.
And what brought the four of us together was 2016 when I was going through YouTube this one night, came across slam poetry videos, and if anybody knows like slam poetry, like once you start watching that, you can't stop.
Anyone who's seen Button Poetry or Brave New Voices knows it's a hole. Once you get in, you'll never come out.
Yeah.
Next video.
Forget doing homework.
So that was like, I don't even know, like 4 or 5 hours of just like video watching. And then it led me to this website called Brave New Voices, which was like advertising this international slam poetry competition that would be happening in DC that year. And so I was really excited about it, told them at Sunday school. And of course, like we couldn't afford it, so hopes and dreams kind of crushed. But coincidentally, a week later, I saw a poster in my school that was advertising this open mic sponsored by Young Writers Project, which is a local nonprofit that helps youth publish their work and create like art. So I decided to tell them that it was a possibility for us and that we would be able to do that. So within us, like the week of February break, we basically had to learn everything we could about slam poetry, write a poem, and then learn how to perform it in order to perform at the open.
And in that process, coming in with our own preconceived notions of what poetry is, and I think some of our own teenage angst, our poetry at first, to be fair, wasn't very good. We had no idea what we were writing. We thought we had to put all these metaphors in it, and by the end, like, I don't think we even knew what the poem was saying. Like, we were looking up cardiovascular disease on WebMD to write about Islamophobia. So, like, we learned a lot about keeping our hearts healthy, not so much about creating a poem. So, when you'll hear it later on tonight, too, but when we went back and looked at Wake Up America and this, like, metaphor-laden and very convoluted poem, we realized that it wasn't saying what we were trying to say. We were trying to put on a mask, put on the idea of what a poet is supposed to be. And so if you listen to Wake America now, and you might have this perspective listening to it later today, it is a really direct poem. It really is very blunt and very straight to the point, and maybe different than some of our other poems, but I think that was one way for us to reclaim our narrative and voice and really be clear what we want to say. And even though it might not be, it might not be full of like allusions or metaphors or alliteration, it still just said what we wanted to say. And I think, as Lena said earlier, we tried to bring our raw emotion into it because we realized that if we don't feel the poem, we can't perform the poem. If the poem doesn't mean something to us, then it won't mean something to the audience.
And the factual based structure also like was like about like bringing more voices into the poem. So a lot of like the things that we looked up were like hidden crimes that like people don't like show about Islam or like Muslim people in the news. So we wanted to bring that to light, and we learned a lot during that process as well. Some of these things we didn't even know about as Muslims.
And the thing is, when we first wrote that poem, we added everybody else's stories, and then like we were performing the poem a couple times, and we're like, okay, this doesn't feel right because we've also experienced things, So we took the time to go back, rewrite it, add our own experiences, and I think that just made it so much more personal and like through that, poetry has always been our outlet to talk about like whatever, whether that's social justice or like actually like, I remember it was during like senior year and we're like, and junior year I think it was, and we're in the middle of the college process and everything, and we're all so stressed out. So we got together at Panera and we wrote a poem right there about like college. So like poetry has really been our outlet for all of us.
But bringing it back to the audition, I think one thing that we realized was that we over-prepared. We came in, we were like color coordinating, we wore the same outfits, same
Long black dresses, white scarves. Not cute.
We were so nervous, we were expecting like a big crowd, but we ended up coming to like an event with 5 people and a box of pizza.
And the 5 people there were the people we invited. So like we're like, oh, okay.
That's fine. But we were still nervous because we found ourselves putting our space where we had to be vulnerable, which was something that we were never really used to, even with the 4 of us. Like, I remember when we started writing poems within each other and we would come into like poetry sessions, we wouldn't even want to share it with each other because we were like, we can't share this part of ourselves because we've been so used to hiding this part and like becoming someone who we're not. Because I remember in middle school, I was somebody who would whitewash my culture, just pretend that I wasn't Arab and that I didn't have a Muslim background, and I would often like make my mother not come into the school because I didn't want people to associate myself with being Muslim. I didn't want to be different, you know, especially in middle school or a time when you have to like fit in with everybody.
Especially a state like Vermont where it is 96% white.
Yeah.
It took us to get out of Vermont to really like understand like how completely whitewashed we were, like each other, and like how much we denied our own identities and stuff like that. It was when we went to Brave New Voices 2016, and I think that was like such an amazing experience for all of us because we went there. There's like 600 poets all around the world, 60 teams competing, everybody sharing their truth and their story. And it was just so awesome because for the first time there was representation. There was somebody that you could relate to, somebody that looked like you. And like back in Vermont, we didn't get that. And so it was really different going from like middle school me to like seeing like a lot of people that look just like me.
And it really contributed to our growth as well because we were able to see people becoming like unapologetically themselves, which again is something we weren't able to do in middle school. So seeing that really inspired us. And then also seeing people randomly breaking out into like rap sessions or just like
in the middle of a bus.
In the middle of a bus or like in the middle of the street was super inspiring to us. And the ability for them to constantly keep speaking their truth wherever they were was super inspiring and something we really wanted to bring back to Vermont because that's something we weren't seeing in Vermont.
And slam poetry, like in DC, is like pretty like out there. And so I think from like being at Brave New Voices, we also learned about like the different experiences, not just in DC, but like around the world. And so we recognized that like a lot of the systems and like institutions that were oppressing people like in other places, we're also doing that in Vermont. So we wanted to make sure that we dismantled that and we're part of that work of like creating justice.
It was such a learning experience because yeah, we were there for the poetry, but then there was also workshops and stuff, and like that was the first time I learned about the school to prison pipeline and like all these things that were happening that I didn't necessarily see in my school, but like I took the time to like look into our graduation rates and like what, okay, this amount of students are graduating, but what % of them actually have the help to go forward and stuff like that. So we took a lot of the things we learned from BMV back with us to Vermont.
And the most inspiring part of Brave New Voices wasn't that we were in these workshops. It was honestly that the fact that youth were so centered in this conversation. They were the poets speaking their truth. They were the facilitators. They were on the panels. I remember at one point they were questioning members from the U.S. Department of Education. And to see young people taking control of their narrative and not just being bystanders but being active participants was something the 4 of us had never really seen or seen like in real life before. You know, it was kind of this abstract thing. And the 4 of us, like before slam poetry, like we would not be on the stage. We would be in the back of the classroom with our heads down, writing our notes, like scared to raise our hand in class, don't like sharpen the pencil too loud kind of kid, you know? So to go from that to seeing youth doing what we wanted to do, we're like, well, they're literally the same age as us. They're the same identity as us. They're doing the same thing as us. We're in the same space as them right now. So why aren't we doing that? Like, why can I not be them when we have the same potentialities?
So we got together and like created this platform, and we took it beyond the stage too. You know, like we went and we did volunteering in our community. We lead workshops for middle schoolers to get them writing and stuff. It was during the summer we all got together, and it was, what grade was it? The workshop.
We did elementary school, but then we also did a middle school.
Yeah, we did workshops with them, and it was so amazing because like a lot of these kids were like, yeah, we're not having these conversations because our parents think we're too young, or like we're not ready to have these conversations. But the things they were writing about were so powerful, and all they needed was somebody to tell them, okay, here's a pen, here's a paper, do your thing, you know? And so that was so amazing.
And that's when we really noticed that creative expression and activism really complement each other. The ability that these young people do have the ability to talk about these issues, but they're not given the space, as mentioned before. So it really did inspire us as individuals to just see other youth being able to use that platform to speak their truth, and something we want to keep going. And that's something the space that we really want to cultivate in Vermont and keep cultivating.
And one of the things that we realized through all that, as was mentioned before very eloquently, that in order to do this work, we need to root it in vulnerability and authenticity. Because as we said earlier, you can't work on a story you don't know. You can't fight for change if you don't know what change is. You can't fight for change if you don't know the stories and have the voices in the room. And we often feel like slam poetry is able to illuminate those voices, give people the platform they need. But also slam poetry, because of the nature of the art form, is incredibly vulnerable. It's incredibly personal, whether it be the writing process in which you have to share your expressions. And I know, like as Kisa mentioned earlier, like in our writing sessions, we would realize things that we hadn't realized individually. For example, we have one poem called American Dream, in which we talk about our parents' expectation for us as refugees and immigrants to this country, and how that affects us in going into the education system and trying to figure out what we want to achieve. And in that, we realized that we're also trying to hide our identities in the process. And that, like when we first started writing that poem, we didn't realize that. But as we went on, we realized more and more about ourselves and our conversations and the workshops, and eventually performing it. And when we perform the poem, you know, every single time I feel like the performance is something different, whether it be the way we say it out loud, whether the way we think about a certain line when we say it, whether the conversation we have with the audience afterwards. There was one time I remember that we did a poem about the hijab, and a woman came up to us afterwards saying that she had taken off the hijab years ago, and you would never have known that she was a Muslim or a hijabi otherwise. And we had a really heartfelt conversation. So you never really know how you're going to impact someone else and how someone else is going to impact you. And I think that's one thing we learned through slam poetry is that if you don't share your story, who will? You know, if you're not taking up that space, who's going to take up your space for you? Who's going to share your story if you're not willing to share it yourself?
And collectively, we have a story, but like individually, we also have many different stories. So it's important to highlight those as well. So, for example, like we're all like hijabis and Muslim, but we're also like very different, like culturally and personality-wise. Lena's Egyptian, Balkisa and I are Somali, and then Kiran's Pakistani. So we have a lot of those cultural differences and upbringings, but then we also have like various music styles. Because we spent like 10 hours on the road together, so the only thing we could like jam to was throwbacks. Other than that,
We could not agree on music.
You should see us in the car. It goes from like podcast to Hamilton to Drake to like.
And so the ability, as Hawa said, to use our platform to diversify the Muslim woman narrative is something that's really, really important to us. Because oftentimes we do, like even as individuals, we get confused with each other. Like people always think I'm Kiran, they always think you're Lena. And really being able to show ourselves as individuals, especially through our solos, really makes our group stronger. And that's one thing I really love about this group, because it's like we learn a lot from each other. And I've learned a lot from these girls along the years.
And I think also part of that group dynamic is that there is, as you guys mentioned earlier, that joyousness in that group. Because we are talking about serious topics, but the thing that makes Muslim girls making change so unique, while making it like change making while also rewarding and like fulfilling and rejuvenating, is that we can go from talking about the school to prison pipeline, talking about oppressions we've seen in our everyday life, marginalities we've seen in our everyday life, to joking about a teacher, to joking about a day in our lives. We can do those in the same moment. The fact that we're able to merge those two things means that we can make activism fun for ourselves. We can find the humor in everyday life and the shared expressions we have. So I think really rooting, because I think a lot of times people expect poetry just to be like really painful and really sad and really like intense like that. While that does have value and you sharing your story is important, I think it's unfair to expect students often, and other people too, young people, to constantly share their pain. So finding ways to root your activism and change making in joy can be really fulfilling, and ensure that I think for us, it's been a really good way of avoiding burnout, because we can go back and forth so quick. And I think we are really good at managing, as we're talking about like describing each other, I think we are really good at managing each other and saying, okay, you've spent way too long on that poem, you take a break, we're gonna watch some Netflix, or we're gonna joke about this, or we're gonna do about that. And like by taking those breaks, we're able to better our poetry and overall experience.
And when it comes to activism, I think it's so much easier having them by my side to do it. You know, I think just being able to call them and be like, hey, like there's this volunteering opportunity, do you guys want to go? You know, just tagging each other along in everything we do. Because yes, we're Muslim girls making change and we're a group, but everybody does their own thing individually too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, like, again, that's what makes our poems so raw, because throughout the writing process, we're able to have like conversations before then, and we go off on rants and we talk about specific issues like within the classroom or politics or with our identity issues. And so that's how our poems start to go off. We start up with conversations and then we start writing. But at first we're always just like so angry to the point we're like, wait, hold on, why don't we write a poem about this? Like, what are we doing? We're poets. So we go off there.
Any teacher who's ever wronged us, you are in a poem, just so you know. If you ever wrong your students, then you are in poems. I got a C on this paper, you know who's gonna who's gonna throw hands now, like.
Yeah, but yeah, so our senior year came around, and so obviously we all now go to different colleges. But the foundation is still there. We're still doing like come together like once in a while, and I think slam poetry just resonated with us so much that we take it in our own different spaces and our different like avenues and ways of expression. So, and then also we got a $90,000 grant from the Doris Duke Foundation, and so through that with Young Writers Project, yeah, we've been able to continue the conversation and have youth more involved in it.
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go. So to conclude, I think the most important thing that we've learned through slam poetry is that youth can do their own movements. They can rise themselves up. They just need support, empowerment, and people believe in them. And then also that giving youth a platform to speak up can be empowering and can really just. Because I think one thing, as Howard mentioned earlier, is that we've been using slam poetry in our everyday lives now, but it's not always manifested in poetry. Sometimes it's manifested in speaking your truth in the classroom, or standing up to a friend, or telling a teacher that what they said made you uncomfortable. And I think those individual lessons that we learned outside the classroom, but was nurtured by our adult mentors as well as our teachers and faculty and stuff like that, made us the people we are now. And I think I don't think any of us can say that slam poetry had not benefited our lives, that we had not made us more holistic people who are able to really see what we want in the world and go after it.
Because you're like able to grow as a person, but then you're also able to like take on things and take on issues and change the world, I guess.
Yeah.
One phone at a time.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.